Coogs house. The national media has found a new way to mess with the Big 12 and the Houston Cougars, and this time it involves messing with the players before they even get there.
You are Locked On Coogs, your daily podcast on the Houston Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Coogs Daily Podcast, all about your Houston Cougars. I'm your host, Parker Ainsworth, here to break down all things Houston Cougars. As we're back from the holiday break, thank you for making Locked On Coogs your first listen each and every day. Whether you're a Houston fan or just a hater, nothing else to do but stop by. Tell us in the comments down below if you're paying attention to the transfer portal rankings out there and above. We're going to talk a lot today. Some at the end, I got a special guest, talk some about a little bit of insight on some portal ranking and portal movement kind of stuff involving Houston. I want to spend a chunk in the middle talking about the new guys coming to Houston in the transfer portal and otherwise. But first, the news story out there about the Big 12 getting potentially screwed over a little bit. This started with some BYU Twitter folks. It expands out to the whole Big 12 if you're paying attention. But the national media has really been yanking the Big 12 around, and it starts with how players get rated. Now, this, again, started with some BYU Cougar fans online and expands out to the whole Big 12 across the wide spectrum of all 16 schools. Jeff Fuller and then a BYU stats account both were pointing out that players BYU was picking up in the transfer portal without having any play or with having good play, certainly without having any bad play, we're seeing their rankings drop on national recruit sites as they announced they were transferring to BYU. So let's talk about this back up a little bit. So let's say a 4-star player, 94 rated linebacker, commits to UT Austin, right? And while he's on the roster at UT Austin, he gets counted as a 4-star, 94 ranked player, right? That's almost a 5-star caliber kid. It impacts how people value them in terms of the star counts and ratings and, preseason polls and stuff like that. They have this many 4 stars, this many guys over a 92, this many that. This all adds up to all those different things. But as a young player, he doesn't really get to play at UT Austin. Then after a year, maybe even 2 years of being on the roster, not playing a whole lot, maybe only playing special teams, he gets counted on as the 94 he was in high school both years he's on the roster at UT Austin. And they get vaunted. They have so many 4 stars and so many this and so many that. So in preseason rankings, people are going to rank them really highly because of their 4 stars, and the strength of schedule for everyone they play goes up to play this Texas team with so many 4 stars and whatever. And then after 2 years not playing, he says, you know what? I'm devout in my faith. I want to get out of here. I want to go somewhere I get to play, and goes to BYU. And all of a sudden, in an instant, he gets cut from a 94 to an 85, a 4-star to a high 3-star, a high 4-star to a high 3-star caliber recruit just by changing where he's going to school. Thus, Texas does not lose a high-end 4-star, and BYU does not gain a high-end 4-star. It changes before the paperwork's finalized that he's leaving. Must be because he's not very good, right? That's the only possible reason, right? Could have been because not because he wants to change the scenery, change the pace, didn't jive with the coaching staff, didn't like Austin, whatever, right? That's actually what happened at BYU, and that's how these systems get gamed a little bit, right? Another thing that happened to BYU, because the same 2 accounts going back and forth about it, was a starting tackle at Michigan, national champion Michigan, right? Was at Michigan as a 96.2 high school ranking, super high, all everything, has good PFF grades, like top end of the Big Ten PFF grades, ends up getting injured. That's all. Transfers BYU post-injury, drops down to an 86, 10 whole points on his recruit ranking. Thus, Michigan doesn't lose a 5-star, BYU doesn't get a 5-star. So BYU can't claim they have one. Michigan can't claim they lost one, right? And that's how these rankings get done. And the biggest thing about this is, and it happens to Houston with things like Wegman going down from a 98 to a 91. Ibaseli went down a couple points. Big 12 to Big 12, it's a couple. You saw Jordan Allen from LSU go down 4 points. Wyckoff from, I guess he started off at somewhere else, but he ended up at Cal. And from Cal to Houston, he's going to go down 3 points. These points add up, right? And the points on your roster, your blue chip ranking, etc., all add up to your preseason ratings, right? Those ratings are considered like quantitative data people are looking at when they make preseason rankings, right? And as they're making those preseason rankings and looking at the quantitative data, those things are getting factored into the strength of schedule. Well, in the SEC, your strength of schedule is going to be based on playing a bunch of teams like the UT Austins that get the 4 stars, and then when they leave, suddenly they're not a 4-star, right? They have 4 stars at the back of their roster that may have never actually become a 4-star. That's what you are going to argue when they leave. They're not actually a 4-star. But they count as a 4-star the whole time they're on your roster. At the Big 12, as soon as they commit to a Big 12 school, they're losing that caliber, that extra oomph on the recruit report card. And so then the Big 12 isn't going to have, because of that bias, right, is not going to have any of those kind of teams on their strength of schedule. Well, that's going to impact things like the end of season resumes for college football playoffs, for bowl games, etc. And ultimately down the line, those things all add up to TV contracts too, because the TV contracts will be paid for by some of those same national media members ranking these teams and players, right? I mean, some of those same TV networks that involve 4 letters ultimately also have recruit rankings that are weighed very heavily in all of this data, and all of those things go together in Bristol, Connecticut. And so I say all that to say that these all tie together in a way that I think people at Houston have understood when Houston was an American Athletic Conference team. If a recruit went from a Power 4 school to an American school, it made sense. Going from Power 5 to Group of 5, whatever, right? You could talk yourself into that taking a step down. But P4 to P4, right? And sometimes with having good play on the field, like it doesn't make any sense. And ultimately, this is, I think, maybe being talked about a lot right now because the SEC and the talk before with playoff and whatever. But you also had like Kirk Herbstreit talking about literally playing a full playoff without taking into account the wins and losses that happen over the course of the season. How would you have that playoff happen if not by using these ratings and rankings that are already drawn up by this biased system that's giving kids stars and an extra 10-point boost, etc., just based on the logo on the side of their helmet and the logo on the patch on their, not the team name, the conference logo on their jersey gives them a bump in these rankings, that bump on the strength of the schedule, that feed into all the cyclical nature of things. And I think that ultimately, as this continues to get pointed out more and more, you're going to have to win on the field too, right? Arizona State has to show up against UT Austin. That has to happen for this to make any sense. We saw Kansas State play a great game against Rutgers just last night, if you're as we're recording this, on actually early Friday morning. But all these things tie together, and how the Big 12 is perceived, and now Houston is perceived as it pulls in the Wegmans of the world, is ultimately a product of this system. And if Houston wants to take that next step, as we're trying to rapidly, we just got to the Power 4 18 months ago, right? As we try to continue to push this thing forward, right, and move this up quickly, we're going to make sure we're fighting against the systems as they're built, as fairly or unfairly as they are. Now, I want to talk some about the other players. So we took a little holiday break, and I want to talk about the players that we've added in the meantime since then, because there's at least one really big impact kind of a guy. Before we get too far, though, I do want to remind you today's show is brought to you by Rocket Money. And if Rocket Money can help you find subscriptions like they did me, you're going to really, really be appreciative of this buddy of ours. If Rocket Money can have subscriptions, if you forgot about your paying, or if you forgot about your paying twice, it's definitely happened to me. Had a few subscriptions I didn't even realize I was paying for. And Rocket Money made it so easy to track them all down. It's like having a personal assistant for your finances. Rocket Money is a personal finance app, helps you find and cancel all of your unwanted subscriptions, monitor your spending, and help lower your bills so you can grow savings. It brings everything together all in one place, one single app. Subscriptions, spending habits, even goals you want to hit this year. Big goals at Locked On Coogs later. We'll talk some, I'm sure, about that in the near future. Rocket Money has over 5 million users, has saved over $500 million in canceled subscriptions, saving members up to $740 a year when using all the app's premium features. Cancel your unwanted subscriptions and reach your financial goals faster with Rocket Money. Go to rocketmoney.com/locked on. It's rocketmoney.com/locked on. rocketmoney.com/locked on. Parker Ainsworth, host of Locked On Coogs here, talking portal things. Both Houston and the Big 12 get a little screwed over in portal rankings and changing of rankings, but also some big things happening. Now, we took a few days off for the holidays. We'll probably also take a day or two at New Year's. We'll see how the next few days go. It's also started Big 12 basketball, so we got a lot going on with all that, right? But some big names added to Houston in the transfer portal since we last talked. The biggest of which is literally a big man, defensive lineman Khalil Laufau. We're getting better at that as time goes on. But Khalil is 6'3", 295, has 2 years left of eligibility, comes from Washington State. Really, really liked what I saw about this guy on YouTube video. Nice thing about having a few days off is I actually got to watch some YouTube on these guys. Really, really firm base, like sturdy trunk type legs. At 295, you kind of wonder where the strength is. It's definitely his lower body. He's definitely hard to move. Great run defender, and certainly not a liability in pass rush. Grades out really well on Pro Football Focus. Frankly, you could almost argue the way that people in the Power 4 are getting screwed in this and that. Washington State, ultimately in the Pac-12, getting screwed probably leads to Khalil even entering the transfer portal in the first place, because this is not a guy that, like, you would have thought needed to leave because he wasn't going to get playing time at Washington State. It's just not the same Pac-12 conference it used to be, right? And so he's looking for a bigger boost in playing opponents and level of play. He's finding that in Houston. He went to Harriman High School in Greater Salt Lake area, and that actually is his connection to Houston, weirdly enough, because he's connected to a linebacker that committed to Houston named Sion Fatu. And Fatu is a linebacker from Bingham High School, also in southern Salt Lake City. The two guys grew up about 15 minutes apart from one another, and Fatu committed about 10 days before Khalil did, and also has 2 years of eligibility. Sion Fatu is a linebacker, 6'2", 226 pounds. And I thought it was interesting. So watching video on him, like his highlight tape stuff is really good. He's really good. And then you look at like his stats across the years and the incredible difference for him between 2023 and 2024 is pretty shocking. Like 2023, he was a solid Mike linebacker, good in coverage, but better in the run, etc. 2024, he was still pretty good in coverage for a Mike linebacker, but he missed a lot of tackles. And, some of that can be bad luck. Some of that can be playing through injuries, etc. I don't mean to say 1 year is more valuable than the other. I would argue in 2023 when he was making his tackles, Utah was a Pac-12 champion, right? Like that's a pretty impressive thing. But he's looking for the fresh start, I think, because 2024 was so bad. Utah had such a crazy bad year last year. He's looking for someone else to play. I'm talking to JT over at Locked On Utes a little bit about him. We have a text thread going back and forth. I'm intrigued by what he has to say. And he said, frankly, it sounds like there's a linebacker room with 2 pro linebackers. There were 4 guys that played and only 2 spots on the field. And so there's some in and out there. I'm intrigued by Fatu. I will say Fatu and Khalil coming together, that's a good package to bring in together. That's 2 guys with a lot of high-end, high Division I reps under their belt and that were very successful individually while doing that. Bring them on. Now, another linebacker that Houston brought in the fold comes from Louisiana, Carmicah Glass. I don't necessarily know I'm going to say linebacker because that's what he played at Louisiana. He has a lot of positions in his future. He just played just 1 year. He's 6'4", 240 pounds. I think he could be like a hybrid player off the bat. He's better at stuff that involves being close to the line of scrimmage, run stopping, pass rushing, etc. But he is rangy and athletic, and like you do want to use some of that in pass coverage to cover the whole flat. What do you want to do with him? I could see him being the kind of guy that grows into a different position but starts as a hybrid, right? You're going to say, let's put on 20 more pounds and rush the passer every play. Or you're going to say, hey, let's lose 20 pounds and cover the guys every play. I could see him going either direction with it. 6'4", 240, very athletic frame to work with. A real steal to me as well. And then 2026 recruit that commits to Houston actually in the same couple days we had off of shows for the holidays was Yaheem Miami Riley. He goes by Miami. He's a 2026 safety from Austin's LBJ High School, the same high school where the McCutcheon brothers went, right? Latrell, the senior, I guess he's technically a senior, multi-time transfer guy, went to Oklahoma and then USC following Riley, and then ultimately came to Houston, plays corner. Latrevion, the younger brother, I think will play dog or the hybrid spot next year, but he played linebacker some early on, played some special teams too. Miami comes from the same high school as them, and I would love to see Houston build up a relationship with LBJ High School because they put a lot of good athletes in that Central Texas area. This safety's got speed. Miami can run. And he's listed at 6 foot, $180. High school, that can be a little, I think he looks thinner than that, but high school, that can be up and down. I don't know. He's fast. He's really fast as a safety. He breaks the ball really well. He frankly is the kind of safety that like his stats aren't crazy impressive because people just don't throw his direction a whole lot. So it's kind of hard. Like you're watching tape and like there's no ball going near him. It's like that's the point, right? The other thing about him is he's great in the return game. He returns kicks and punts, electric returner. So make sure paying attention to him on that. Now, those are guys that have joined the Houston Cougar roster or have committed to the Houston Cougars in Miami's case in the last few days. There's one guy I wanted to investigate a little bit more because I didn't quite understand his story fully. That is Jason Brooks Jr., offensive lineman and transport coming to Houston, Adobe High School, right? Houston native kid coming back to the city of Houston from Oklahoma State. And I brought in a guest to help talk to me a little bit about what all went down there, as well as other aspects of the recruiting stuff in the third segment. So I want to, get into that in a second. But before we get too far into all of that, I do want to remind you today's show is brought to you by FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. And the NFL playoffs are almost here. Even if I'm out of my fantasy football playoffs, it's not too late to get on the regular season action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers finish the season strong with $250 in bonus bets for your first $5 bet hitting. FanDuel has so many ways to pick up a W. I love betting on which player is going to score a touchdown, just anytime touchdowns. Real easy. Find the guys who are going to score, put it down, money on anytime touchdown, get some money back. How many points each team will score, even if the Texans only score 2 points or whatever, right? Just put down $5. It hits, right? FanDuel.com, join today. FanDuel.com for a chance at $250 back in bonus bets at the first $5 bet hits. Make every moment more with FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All right, Cody, in talking through Houston, Oklahoma State open up Big 12 play in basketball, we also start talking about football because it's hard to not talk about football. Jason Brooks is now a Houston Cougar, and you sound a little beat up about it when I talked to you about it. And I want to ask first, what can you tell me about Jason? And then B, how did Houston look into getting this guy? I think he's kind of good.
Not that a 3-9 record is going to be indicative of the backup talent, but Jason Queso Brooks was the backup guard. And here's the most frustrating portion of this conversation is he outgraded both of our starting right guard and left guard for well over an entire year. Now, because we had 7, senior returning offensive linemen, I kind of understand to some degree him being a backup, but he was still grading out the starters and the seniors this year as well. But for whatever reason, we tried to convince him to take a red shirt. He didn't want to take the red shirt because when you're beating out the starters every single week, you'll feel like it's only a matter of time before they reward you with playing time. It wasn't happening. So he went back home, had a conversation with his family. They decided he was going to accept the red shirt. He comes back, and then we pull a fast one and say, oops, actually, just kidding. Even though we told you we need you to red shirt, we lied. We don't want you to red shirt. We actually would prefer you to play, but you're not going to play, but we want you to be ready to play. It was just it was a song and a dance, and it should come with a curse word, but I'm not going to throw it out there. It is very infuriating because Oklahoma State's failure this season was because of complacency, right? We had too many dudes that were coming back as upperclassmen that required the least amount of work from the coaching staff, so they were automatically thrust into starting roles, even if they were late, even if they sucked, even if they walked or jogged on the football field, as you can tell. I am very fired up about Jason Queso Brooks leaving Oklahoma State because he was the best interior offensive lineman that we had, and we threw him to the scrap heap. And then we tried to manipulate a red shirt scholarship, all of that crap around it. And it really is infuriating when that happens. I know that there is some, I don't want to say promises given to every school in the country, but you know how the recruiting game goes. I don't want to say promises may not be the right word, but you are giving a sales pitch on why you want the kid to return, right? And if part of your sales pitch is you need to come back because you were the best graded lineman we had all season, and then you don't play him, and then you maneuver the red shirt around him, it just, dude, I want to throw a bunch of people over it.
And I don't mean to say a single guard can change winning all that much. That's the great thing about football. It's a big team game. But the season he played a lot more in, it felt like y'all won a lot of games.
And Ollie Gordon rushed for almost 1,800 yards. Yeah, go figure that one.
Okay, so I'm not the only one drawing that connection here, I guess, is what I'm saying.
I'm not bitter about Queso leaving at all.
So I love offensive linemen that have nicknames tied to food.
Yeah.
Why Queso? What's the, as the insider here, what's the Queso deal? What's the thought?
To be honest with you, and I've had several conversations with Jason, and I don't think I've ever even asked what the reasoning behind the nickname was. I would assume it had something to do with food, but that could be a far stretch.
Well, I'm looking forward to hearing more about it because we already have a center named Pancake. Right.
Oh, okay.
I think that may have a football/food combination there. We'll see. He first year starting was last year, and he's a young guy, so he'll I think grow into a big role at some point. But Queso Brooks, if you mentioned he's very, very good, and Ollie Gordon ran for a bunch of yards behind him. Is he a better run blocker than pass blocker? Like what's he do well?
Yeah, he's a run blocking individual. I would say, if there's going to be like an argumentative point here to maybe why Jason Queso Brooks wasn't, viewed as above the two guards that we had that started, was because he's not as technically sound as they were at times, but he's a road grader, dude. Like Jason Queso Brooks is the guy that will pick somebody up, carry him into the linebacker. He might get a 15-yard penalty occasionally because that's the way he plays the game. We needed some of that this season at Oklahoma State. We had a bunch of prima donnas getting a little bit of NIL money that had a successful season in 2023. We lost the physicality that is necessary to be a good running football team. Jason Queso Brooks was the physicality that we were bringing to the fold, and we just didn't use it. We went with, again, seniority that required the least amount of effort, which is probably why every single coach not named Mike Gundy has been fired, because the complacency was it's laziness, dude. That's what it is. Like, if you are having to develop younger guys, that means you're going to have to work later, right? You're going to have to do extra film preparation. Those are some of the things that we were willing to do in 2023 that we clearly were not willing to do as a staff in 2024. And guys like Jason Queso Brooks were the ones that did not get to reap the benefits.
Well, and that's fascinating. Again, you put all that time into him when he's young, and then bench him when he's older. And again, he's a Houston area kid, so he's coming back. He went to Dobie High School, and he's coming back home. I want to pitch an idea to you because you are, for the folks at Locked On Coogs who maybe don't know this, you are very actively involved in recruiting and 7-on-7 and those circles. You travel the country covering it, and you talk a lot about it. So again, if people Locked On Coogs want to dive into it, at All Day O State's a good place to follow that. I have a crazy pitch here, and I don't know if it necessarily applies to a guard or not, but Houston's gotten a lot of Houston area kids to come back to Houston. It all seemed to simultaneously happen around the time that one Stephon Boogie Johnson, another Oklahoma State Cowboy in his past life, decided that he was going to return. I think a lot of people were surprised based on how poorly Houston threw the football last year that Boogie wanted to come back. I think it was very understandable. Hey, he needs to go get somewhere where he gets shown off and gets turned into a pro. And he said, actually, I'm going to do that here. And I'm going to have it seems like I'm going to have all these dudes come back. He and his father tweet out pictures about he and Connor Wegman, like in 7-on-7 circles together and stuff like that, right? When they were little kids, right? In your experience, both with Boogie, his father does 7-on-7 stuff, and with just recruiting, how crazy of an outreach is that? A crazy leap to be making?
That more people want to come back to the Houston area because
that Boogie's involved in it, like that Boogie's as a character with the charismatics. Like, is he pulling people in? Is it people want to play with Boog?
Not only is it just playing with Boog, you mentioned the 7-on-7 connection. So one of the things that Stephon Johnson, Boogie's dad, does on top of the 7-on-7, the scouting and recruiting, he also puts on like combines. And part of the combines is he'll have meetings with parents to tell them what to expect in recruiting and why transferring could potentially be an option. And he breaks down all of the different nuances for parents and families that have nothing to do with on-field play. So because of that, even if people don't end up, playing with Boogie at any college particular destination, the fact that Boogie's dad and his entire staff with prospects have spent years giving people the right understanding of how to navigate the recruiting landscape, because it has changed entirely. And Boogie, when his dad does these seminars, he talks about the relationships being more important than the universities. It didn't used to be that way. And it's not just about chasing the NIL dollars. It's all about relationships. And you're seeing some of that with the transfer portal. Guys are following coaches that recruited them. Oklahoma State's getting it right now, right? We've got a bunch of SEC guys that have come to Oklahoma State in the last few weeks because Todd Grantham recruited them 5 years ago when they were at Florida, right? So even if they didn't land at Florida, the fact that he recruited them and Florida made his top 3, things of that nature, that's what Todd Grantham's bringing to Oklahoma State. That's what Boogie's dad does on a daily basis all across the country. So he can tell you about the analytical side of the game. He can help you break down film, but he can also explain to you, this is what recruits are looking for. This is what coaches are looking for. This is the conversations that you're supposed to be having. So you brought up Weigman. I'm sure at one point in time, he got very phenomenal advice from people in Boogie's camp that stuck with him even after the Texas A&M stuff.
Well, and again, I'm not saying anything, that shouldn't be happening is happening. It's just that, like you're saying, his dad is involved in this world. He's a very personable guy. People on the team seem to like Boog. Like it all, I think it all clicks. And I don't mean to dig another knife in the Oklahoma State hole, but as a guy that would know these guys a little bit more personably, you're laughing at something. I'm not going to laugh at that. I wanted to get your 2 cents on that because I feel like it all started happening shortly after Boogie said he's coming back, and everyone's kind of like, "Oh, Boogie's coming back!" Like Houston lost another great receiver in Joseph Manjack to TCU. Yes. So I don't mean to say that every receiver did what Boogie did,
right?
But people very quickly like, "Oh, something's going to happen there. Let's see what that's about," Anyway, Cody, thank you for helping break down some of the crossover here between Houston and Oklahoma State as we're looking at the crazy landscape between schools here. I'm sorry I don't have a potential starter to talk to you about, although I'm not actually that sorry because that means we kept them.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, again, I think it's exciting what Houston is building, and I am very close to Boogie and his family, so I've paid attention to all of the things that he's doing at Houston, and offensively, could the wide receiver core been utilized more effectively this season? I don't think anybody on the Houston sideline would argue that either, right? Was Donovan Smith the right choice? I don't know. But as the season progressed, it really didn't look like it. It looked like Chris maybe should have been a guy the whole time. And if Chris is the guy the whole time, what does the offense look like? So those conversations are naturally going to happen. But at the end of the day, they believe wholeheartedly in what Houston is doing and what they've built most recently. And the coach, we talked about Steve Lux, right? And basketball being a program builder that has a resume that indicates that. Well, Willie Fritz is the exact same thing. And I think that excitement around Houston is partially because of the fact that you can get the area guys to come back in, right? Houston has a lot of talent, but maybe because of geographically how far south it is, not every Big 12 school recruits Houston area. I don't know why, but it's true, dude. And Oklahoma State is one of them. We don't recruit the Houston area very heavily whatsoever. So there's going to be guys from around that area that left that are going to be able to be convinced to come back home, because most of the things that you can accomplish in the Big 12, you can do at any school. This is the only conference in the country where number 16 can beat number 1, and it's not like the craziest thing in the world. And because of that parity in the league, Houston can go from 16th to 1st, just like Arizona State did, just like Oklahoma State could.
Well, and frankly, we've also seen, like you're saying, that Arizona State can do it, and Houston beat a ranked Kansas State this year. They just had an epic bowl win of their own. It's a crazy and fun conference to follow. Cody, thank you for your insight on what the recruiting world looks like and what Jason Brooks looks like. It's, again, a weird pairing that Oklahoma State and Houston cross over in a couple of different ways there. Yeah. Looking forward to the basketball game Monday. Locked on Coogs here each and every day. Locked on Oklahoma State also here each and every day for all of your Cowboy or Cougar druthers. Thank you again for tuning in. Locked on Coogs, primarily Locked On Podcast Network with your team every day. And Cody, I always wrap with Go Cougs.
Oh, God bless Go Pokes. I'm with you, buddy.
Boom.